So proxies are basically just low resolution copies of your main media. Now, the reason we want to make proxies is to make it easier for your editing program to play back your footage in real time in your timeline. A lot of the time you might be working with a bunch of different cameras and codecs, and some codecs are going to be easier for your computer to read than others. So it can be smart to create proxies for those harder to read files so that you don't experience any lag when editing. In DaVinci, we're able to select the resolution and the format of our proxies so that you can control how much space they take up and how easy they will be for your computer to read. You also have the option to choose where to save these proxies and easily hand them over along with all of your other original media to other computers or other editors so that they can also use those same proxies. You also don't even have to make proxies within DaVinci. You can use another software like Adobe Media Encoder, or you can even get your camera to record proxies internally at the same time as it's recording the original media. And then you can just link to those proxies so you don't even need to spend time making proxies. My Sony a7S III and A1 give me the option to simultaneously record proxies at the same time as the main footage. Now, I use proxies all the time, especially on big projects, because I find that things can get sluggish when my timeline starts to get very cluttered with tons of clips and effects. Now, if you're just working on something short and not that complex and you have a decent computer, then you probably won't even have to make proxies. I've also found that DaVinci can handle certain formats so much easier than Premiere Pro. So with things like drone footage and GoPro footage, I don't really even need to make proxies for those files. Whereas when I was editing in Premiere, there was no way I could even play back GoPro footage without dropping frames. So I'm obviously really happy to see this major performance boost in DaVinci. But like I said before, if I'm working on a big project, I'll still make proxies of pretty much everything in my media pool. That way I have the option to switch to proxies and get smoother playback if I ever need to. So if you are limited on space, you might only want to create proxies for the media that absolutely needs it. Now, the one big thing about making proxies in DaVinci is that you can't continue to edit while you're generating proxies. So if you have a lot of media that you need to proxy, it would be smart to leave it all going overnight or at a time that you don't need to be editing. That way, when it's time to edit, your proxies are ready to go and you can fly through your timeline without a problem. Personally, I like to create proxies at the end of each shoot day, and I don't wait until the end of the entire shoot. That way, once I'm done filming, I just need to proxy the last day's worth of footage and I'm good to go. So with that being said, let's jump into DaVinci. I'm going to show you guys exactly how I make proxies. All right, so we're in our media pool here, and I want to create a proxy file for every single piece of media that we have within this folder over here. So you'd think that you can right click on the folder and select generate proxy media, but that is not an option. You have to actually select the media itself. You can't select folders. So what we're going to want to do is just go over here to the left side of our media pool. And what we're going to do is select the top folder here, hold shift, and then select the bottom one. That way we have all of those folders selected, and it's going to show us every single clip within all of those folders. This is one way to be able to view every single clip within our project. So now what we can do is hit Command A. That's going to select everything in our media pool. We can right click and we can select generate proxy media. Now, before we do that, you might be asking yourself, okay, how do we know what resolution the proxy media is going to be at and what format? Well, like we learned before, we can choose those settings in the project settings right here. That's down here in the bottom right corner, this little gear icon, or Shift 9 on our keyboard. It's going to open up our project settings. And down here under the master settings, we have optimize media and render cache. So we can choose what resolution we want our proxy media set at. So in this case, we can choose half. That's what I usually work with. And I like to work in H.264. On my MacBook, it does work fine. If you are running on a slower computer, you can choose ProRes. ProRes is going to be a more uncompressed format, meaning that the computer has to do less work to read the file. H.264 is more compressed. So I usually just stick with that. That's been working great for me. And that's pretty much it. These are the settings for the proxies. And we can also choose where we want to store that proxy media. And we've already done that, so we don't have to worry about that. So let's click save. And we're going to go back here. We're going to select everything, Command A, and we're going to do the same thing again, right click, and we are going to select generate proxy media. You're going to get this generate proxy media window here. and it's going to start going through and rendering out every single file. So in this case, generating proxies would take a very long time for this. So this is something that I would do before I go to sleep. So I wake up the next morning and all the proxies are finished. So when I was actually working on this project, I would be importing my clips at the end of each day and creating proxies for just that day. You don't have to create proxies at the end of the entire shoot. You can very easily update your project file at the end of each day with the new clips and create proxies for just those new clips. That's the process I typically use and is the one that I used for this OnePlus project. That way, when we were completely done shooting, I didn't even have to go through the process of creating proxies for everything. I only had to create proxies for that last day. And then when we were done shooting, there were proxies for every single piece of media. Now, even though I press cancel, DaVinci has already started making the folder structure for all the proxies. And basically, it will maintain the same folder structure as our original media, but it's going to fill those folders with proxy media instead of our original media. So let's just look at the project files here. So let's go into the DaVinci Resolve project files. We'll go into our working folders here. And if we go into proxies, we can see that it's created a proxy media folder here. Now we can open that and we have the same folder as our original project folder here. So it's going to save that same folder structure that we have in our original project. Let's open that. We can see it has video, and then in video it has the first day of the entire shoot. So DaVinci is going to create the same folders for our entire project in here. Within each one of these folders, it's going to have the proxy media. So in this case, it already generated one of the proxies. So this is a low resolution of the original media. So I just want to give you guys an example of what proxied media in my timeline plays back like versus the original media. So if you can see in my timeline, I've generated proxies for these clips right here. Now, if I go up to playback and turn off use proxy media if available, I'll take all this, drag it into my timeline, and let's just scrub through here. Now we can see that it's not bad, but it's clearly skipping points and it's not an exact playback of where the playhead is. Now, if I turn on use proxy media if available, it significantly increases the performance. It's like wherever the playhead is at, I'm seeing that exact frame. And it is really awesome to be able to flow through your timeline like this so seamlessly without any dropped frames. And we can barely even tell the resolution change between the proxies and the original. If I zoom in a lot here and I turn off the proxies, we can see that there honestly isn't even that big of a visual difference. It's very hard to tell which one's the proxy, which one isn't. We can see just by the change in the grain, there's a bit of a difference, but it's pretty minimal. Now, once you've actually generated the proxy media, how are you going to know if DaVinci is using the proxy media or the originals? A lot of the time, it can be hard to tell even when you're working at half the resolution. The proxy media can still look pretty good, and the only way that you can really tell a difference is if you zoom in. So how do you really know for sure that you're using proxy media or your original media? Well, if we go up to our playback menu up here, we can see that we have this option, use proxy media if available. When this is checked, it will always use proxy media if there is proxy media generated for the current clip. If there isn't, then it's not going to use proxy media and it's going to be using the original clip. Well, that is also not good enough for me. I'd like to know which files in my media pool have proxy media generated for them and which ones don't. So the way that we can do that is to right click up here in this column area and we can select proxy. That's an option right here. So if we select that, now we have a new column that says proxy, and it's going to tell us if our clip in our media pool has a proxy created for it or not. So we can see because we didn't let those proxies generate, all of these are still set to none. But if you actually go through the proxy generation process, you'll be able to see which videos actually have proxies and which ones don't. This is especially helpful when you're not generating proxies for your entire project. Let's say that you're working with different formats and there's one format specifically that doesn't work well in your timeline and you just want to generate proxies for that one camera. What you could do is just select that one folder, generate proxies, and when you're viewing everything like this, if you want to see which clips have proxies and which ones don't, you could just check this column right here and you'll be able to clearly tell which ones have proxies and which ones don't. Now, last thing I want to mention is when you are getting to the coloring stage of your edit, you want to make sure that you turn proxies off, or if you choose to keep them on, just keep that in mind, because a certain grade can look different on a proxy than your original media. So personally, when I get to the color page, a lot of the time I will keep proxies on, but I'll turn them off every once in a while just to make sure that the colors aren't drastically different or my final image doesn't look a lot different than what I'm seeing on the proxies.